Hello, 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 hello. I got a lot I'm talking about tonight. I got a lot that's been on my brain the past week, and there's a lot to go through. So obviously, I'm going to be talking about Matt Walsh. Going to be talking about Am I Racist? Going to be talking about more of like the online reception to it, specifically how this film highlights the dangerous woke ideology, not only in culture but especially in Hollywood. Going to be taking a look at that. We're also going to be taking a look at the Penguin. I'm going to be giving a review of the Penguin show on Max, episode 1, and I'm going to be answering the question: should you watch this show? After watching episode 1, I have a pretty good idea of the vibe, of the quality of everything of the show. I'm going to be answering that question: should you be watching this show, The Penguin? I know there's a lot out there for you to watch, and so I'm going to be talking about that. But I am going to be talking about Matt Walsh first. Am I Racist? His new documentary. But I'm also at the very end of this live stream, I'm going to be doing a reaction to some Arcane stuff. If you guys are familiar with the animated League of Legends show Arcane on Netflix, I loved season 1. And I'm really excited about season 2 coming out in November. And so I'm going to be doing a reaction to the trailer and another thing they posted during Geek Week. So hope you stick with me. I hope this is a lot of fun. I know I'm going to have a lot of fun walking through all this, expressing my thoughts throughout tonight's live stream. So let's go ahead and jump into Matt Walsh. So Matt Walsh is exposing the dangerous woke ideology, not only in culture, but by proxy, Hollywood. Now, we all know that Hollywood kind of thinks, and in some ways it's true, thinks that they control Hollywood. And there's some truth to that, meaning controlling Hollywood, meaning they control culture. There's some truth to that. In some ways, Hollywood is culture. That is true because they are kind of like the flashy front face to what culture has. Now, Hollywood doesn't make a difference in our day-to-day lives. It doesn't exactly affect your personal life outside of enjoying maybe a piece of media or a film that comes out of Hollywood. However, Hollywood is pop culture, and pop culture is culture. And so this woke ideology, we're going to explore a little bit of it, but first we're going to take a dive into this film. So if you have been living under a rock the past week, Matt Walsh has been on a bunch of podcasts talking about his new documentary film called Am I Racist? This is his second film. The first one was called What is a Woman? And it's basically satire, comedy, while also expressing a point about culture and a flaw in culture and something that's so ridiculous in culture that we can laugh at it, but also acknowledging that this is a very serious thing that people take very seriously. And it's damaging in a lot of ways. And so we're going to hear kind of his thought behind the purpose of making this film, as well as the reception. And then as well as just kind of honestly, the truth behind what he's saying, because we see it all over the place. I have a few examples from Hollywood that I will show. That's kind of more recent stuff. So, but first, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast about a week ago, and I want to play this little clip of him talking about his, thoughts behind the film. So let's watch this.
But for them, they have one lens for seeing the world, and the lens is through this left-wing racial ideology. So everything that happens is colored by that.
Right.
And when he says them, I'm pretty sure what he's referring to is people who buy into, specifically with this film, the Am I Racist film, specifically the people who buy into the idea that like nobody is racist if you are not white. Like you can't be non-white and racist, but every white person is inherently racist. It's basically taking the idea of racism and white guilt and taking it to the farthest reaches of the dangerous woke ideology. And when I say dangerous, I mean it's dangerous because it is causing division. And he points this out in some capacity. And division in the country, especially during like an election year, it's a very dangerous thing, and it's very dangerous for the future of families and communities and states and countries, when you are purposefully dividing and calling people racist, or saying that they are inherently racist when you know to be what's true about yourself. You can't, someone else can't tell you what is true about you and how you feel and what's in your own mind. And also, no one has the right uh, to insinuate something so horrible as being racist on you, right? So let's keep listening.
Everything is understood through that lens. So anything, I mean, you think about Michelle Obama when she was first lady. She had multiple stories that she would tell about as first lady being discriminated against because of her race, allegedly. And
I'm just realizing I'm also wearing a dark shirt with flannel. I didn't realize I was matching him. I did not even need to notice that till just now.
And one of them was she was in line for ice cream or something, and someone cut in front of her. And she told this story in some interview, this very dramatic story about, well, they didn't see her because she's black. And meanwhile, it's like we've all been cut in, lady. People have cut in front of all of us. It's just that if it happens to me at Walmart, I don't think of it racially. I just think, oh, this person's an asshole.
Exactly.
But for her, it's all racial. So that's
a crazy one to say that someone cutting in front of you, a selfish act, is somehow racist. Just because that's like looking for racism everywhere.
Right.
That kind of situation.
That's a good point. Looking for racism everywhere. That's very valid, because that's the kind of dangerous mentality that drives us to division, that drives us to honestly insanity as culture. And it's everywhere in Hollywood. I have an example, but we all kind of know it to be true. And it is so crazy to take it to the extreme and say that it's racism when it's honestly just someone being rude to you. And it doesn't matter what race you are. People are rude at times. And the way to combat that is to not say, oh, I was attacked, or I was a victim of a racial injustice, but more so you just combat it with being kind to a person you come across and choose not to be an annoying person. It's not racism. It's just people occasionally being rude and selfish. So it's a crazy idea to call that racism. That's nuts.
Situation is so normal. It's so normal that some dick cuts in front of you.
Right, exactly.
Right.
It's an unpleasant thing that happens to all people. And if you're not in the kind of race hustler bubble, you don't see it that way. But
it's interesting.
So the race hustler bubble is how he described it. I have some more stuff I'm going to go through, but the race hustler bubble. The race hustler is the term that he uses. I think this is very interesting. I'm sure this is through the production of the film, or maybe before. It was something that he used as a term of description to the people and the culture and the mindset that he was trying to expose here. The race hustling culture is strong and vibrant in Hollywood. I mean, getting to kind of like fringe ideas. It's not even that fringe, but we all know that Hollywood has been used to influence culture in so many ways, today especially. But if you don't think that's true, I'm sure in the past, if you don't live under a rock, you've heard that the CIA has used Hollywood in the past and still does to this day to float propagandic ideas out to the culture, whether it's like being pro a certain war in the past, or communistic, socialistic ideas. The CIA has used Hollywood to sway culture, specifically American culture, in one direction or the other, because Hollywood is flashy. They are the entertainers, and they are this empty vessel that ultimately has nothing to stand on except a few creative people. But we've been put them up as like this idol in culture, and the CIA has used that to their advantage to sway culture. Well, I'm not saying the CIA is behind this, but in the same way, Hollywood sways culture or attempts to sway culture in this race hustling and extremely dangerous woke ideology. Going back to the film Am I Racist? The interesting thing about this is that on Rotten Tomatoes, there was over 1,000 verified audience ratings with a 98%. And in the critics, which this is almost unheard of, in the critics rating, there's only 11 reviews, and there's no major reviewing organization that reviewed this thing. All right. And here's something from Matt Walsh's X. So, beginning in mid-August, we reached out to a dozen of mainstream outlets offering an early screener of the film. Those outlets include Time, AP, IndieWire, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, New York Times, The New Yorker, and many others. We followed up to virtual silence. And so this is very interesting because essentially what he's saying is that, sort of what I'm saying, is these companies who review films, like it's a part of their reputation to review films. Let's also not forget, this has been a very big success. It has nearly $9 million, one of the highest grossing documentary films in all time, the highest grossing documentary film in over a decade. And the fact that there's no serious reporter out there that wants to touch this is crazy. It's absolutely nuts because it's the same thing. It's kind of like the mentality of if you ignore it, they hope it'll just go away. And they have been like places like, Time, IndieWire, Variety, New York Times, the Hollywood Reporter has been promoting in a positive light. This, what I've mentioned, is this woke ideology and this race hustling culture for so long that when you have someone who points out and makes a film that points out how ridiculous this culture is, it just makes sense that they would just want to ignore it. It is unheard of, absolutely unheard of, to see a film that has virtually no real critic reviews. 11 reviews, and those are not by any mainstream outlets. Well, today there was some news dropped that was very interesting to me. And the Hollywood Reporter put out an article that says one writer dares to review Am I Racist? It's like it's a big scandal. It's like, oh, they dare to review this. Like, this is such a crazy idea. This is such a crazy film, such a divisive film that it makes them shake in their boots to even consider reviewing this film, to even acknowledging that it exists. And the first line of this is hilarious. Though an anti-DEI film from conservative media sites Daily Wire has become one of the highest grossing docs of the past decade, top entertainment outlets have declined to review it. And it's for the reasons I'm saying. They won't say why these reasons are, but it's so incredibly obvious that if it goes against the narrative, by the narrative they are pushing, this really far left fringe woke Hollywood race hustling culture ideology, then they just will act like it doesn't exist. And so the fact that everyone's declining to review it is hilarious, but no one's acknowledging it except this one person, Joel Stein. From the conservative media site Daily Wire. That is where you can find this. It's also in theaters. And again, I appreciate that this guy pointed out the fact that it is the top grossing docs in the past decade. This guy goes through, he's actually pretty funny in the way he describes stuff. He went to Burbank to watch it, Burbank, California. Apparently there was like hardly anybody there. Very interesting read. It's from the Hollywood Reporter. It's called One Writer Dares to Review Am I Racist? Even though the audience loved it and everyone seems to have a blast watching this film, Hollywood Reporter's like, we're going to be the one media outlet that's going to review this thing, and they're acting like it's a novel idea. It should be reviewed the same as any film, in my opinion. It just is like another motivating point to back up what he said in Joe Rogan's podcast about race hustling. I want to play another clip that kind of is someone who's been in Hollywood. If Robert Davey, he's a bit of an older actor, and I want to play this clip from him. It is on Fox News, but I think he makes a good point. I know this is like the other side, right, of the far left, and I'm not endorsing Fox News by any means, but this is an interesting moment in an interview where they were talking about like who he supports and kind of Hollywood's like being ideologically captured. Is that a right word? I'm not sure. But let's listen to what he has to say real quick, because this is interesting, the point he makes.
Well, first off, I think every celebrity is a citizen, and citizens have a right to speak and say who they want to represent.
So he's addressing the fact that celebrities have endorsed a political candidate, like Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish, Ben Stiller, these kind of people.
Sure. Or who they're voting for. That's okay. And a lot of the people are tremendously creative, and they should speak out. But there's a kind of disconnect from those celebrities, because I've been in Hollywood 46 years. I was there when there were conservatives like.
This is a very interesting point he's about to make. The idea of conservatives being in Hollywood, which if you haven't heard, there is hundreds of podcasts online right now of people in Hollywood that talk about how, like, Dennis Quaid, I just talked about this a few weeks ago. Dennis Quaid says that it is something you cannot talk about. You have to either be one side politically or keep your mouth shut if you work in Hollywood. And so, like, when this guy, comes out and talks about this, there's a reason he's old. There's a reason this guy is older talking about this, because he was in the legacy Hollywood where there was some voices that weren't super left. And it was more like not conservative, traditional liberals, where it wasn't this far left ideology. But let's continue to hear what he has to say.
Sinatra, Jimmy Stewart, and Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston, right? One of the biggest old-timey actors, is more conservative leaning.
Many others, and Johnny Carson.
I also heard John Wayne was more conservative in another podcast.
And there was a balance back then. As we know today, the media, there's no balance.
A balance. And this is a point that I actually am very passionate about. The fact that Hollywood has no balance, because when it comes down to it, yes, Hollywood has been used as a propaganda arm for the government, for the CIA, for the FBI, for a whole bunch of different reasons. But at its core, the people who keep Hollywood moving are creative individuals, right? It's money and creative individuals. But without the creative individuals, the money would be nothing. You actually lose the money if you don't have the real creative people making the films. And so this is something I'm very passionate about, because honestly, movies should be for everybody. It should not ever be like messaging one way or the other. The solution to this far left woke ideology, this dangerous ideology, this very divisive ideology that we see coming out of Hollywood, the solution is not to go to the other side and make, a super conservative, super pro-gun, kind of like rubbing it in your face kind of films. Like, we're annoyed with this side. Don't do the same thing on this side, right? Make interesting films, tell interesting stories, be creative, be skilled at the job, and let it be politically balanced so that there's accountability there, so that one side doesn't feel like they have too much power or can insert too much messaging that ultimately is uncalled for in the general public. Like, the best type of films and the best type of entertainment are people who either remain politically agnostic when it comes to their work, or if there is a political topic, that there is a strong middle ground. Like, if you look at the film that Steven Spielberg made, Lincoln, a handful of years back, it might be over a decade that film came out. It's getting to be kind of an older film. But you look at a film like that, and there's like patriotism, and there's also like left and right politics injected into that biopic. And it's just such a well-told story because it was kind of politically agnostic, meaning not choosing a side, but at the same time, it dealt with the political issues in the country during the Civil War. And it was an incredibly engaging story. It made you think, it made you consider. And I appreciate stuff like that. That's when we get the most quality entertainment. The best stories we've ever heard or seen on screen is when we have those situations, not one extreme or the other. Now, I think this is interesting to see Matt Walsh making a film like Am I Racist, just because there's a sense of irony to Hollywood when there's like one person who has a successful film that kind of like is a direct counter to this. But I would say Am I Racist is being enjoyed by both sides politically. It's only being hated and not wanting to be touched by people who are ideologically captured and are race hustlers, as he brought up in the Rogan podcast.
You have people like Oprah, $3 billion. You've got Lady Gaga, $150 million. Chris Rock, $60 million.
Okay, so he's talking about people in Hollywood are disconnected from the general public, and so their political opinions ultimately become flat in some ways.
Meryl Streep, $200 million. Julia Roberts, $250 million.
And again, I'm not saying that I'm not endorsing anybody, and I'm not telling you who to vote for. I am saying that right now it's so politically charged in the country that when you are countering these ideas like the woke ideology, the far left extremism, and the race hustling culture, it does obviously get propped up by one side politically. But I'm not telling you who to vote for. I wouldn't say take this guy's advice either. I'm just saying he makes a good point, having experience in Hollywood.
Ben Stiller, $200 million. Everybody going like this. So they're not the rank and file. They're not the Teamsters that actually make the sets work. That 60% of the Teamsters are for Donald Trump. So there's a huge disconnect in terms of money and the understanding of what the problems of our nation are. The left, the Democratic Party, has been hijacked by an extreme woke ideology from the left.
Hollywood has been hijacked by an extreme woke ideology from the left. Yeah.
As we've even seen from the AOC the other day.
They get into politics. I'm not going to talk about politics. I'm just talking about this crazy ideology that's been taken way too far, right? So the question is, with all of this information that I've kind of thrown out and talked about, let's go to another podcast where Matt Walsh talks about kind of like his purpose behind making this film, right? What was his reasoning behind it? And I think he sums it up pretty well in this one podcast with Jillian Michaels.
Right. Well, how do you get into it? How do you kind of decide what aspect of this issue to investigate, really?
And in my mind, when he's talking about investigation, he's talking about like what was my purpose behind it, right? What angle do we take? What do I find valuable to tackle as the topic and investigate in this realm of racism, right? So what's his starting point that is consistent with his values?
And so we wanted to really look at the kind of the race hustle grifters, the so-called anti-racists, the DEI types. And because it seems to me that whatever kind of racial tension people are feeling in society, a lot of it is because of these people, that they want the tension to be there. They want the division. They want the resentment, the suspicion, all that kind of stuff, the guilt, everything that gets wrapped up into it. And that's who we wanted to target. That's who we wanted to expose with the film. And we decided the best way to do it was to take kind of this satirical approach, where a little bit of a curveball, that we decided that, well, I'll start by asking questions, but rather than remaining skeptical, I'm going to believe whatever these people tell me.
Interesting. So yeah. So he's basically saying that he thinks that the majority of the division in the country are from people who actively seek out that division, who make this a dangerous culture, essentially, who want um, who want the tension, right? And the important thing is he's basically saying like, hey, I wanted this film to expose that. I wanted this film to show their wacky ideas, how extreme they are, and honestly, how kind of evil that this mentality is that can cause people to actually act evil in return because they bought into this mentality. And it's super interesting to basically saying like, hey, we're not like trying to just poop all over people who are liberal in their politics, but really we're trying to get at the foundation of where the problem is, and it's the people who want division and have taken the idea of social equality between races and people who honestly like we just need to see everybody as equal and see everybody as people and treat them with dignity and respect. That used to be the anti-racist idea, and now it's gone so far to where it's like if you're white you have to have white guilt, and he's like saying that's divisive, that's degrading, it's corrupting the country and it's corrupting families, and it's not healthy, not only for individuals but for culture. And that idea needs to be pushed out. And who are the number one, in my argument I've mentioned so many times, who's the number one industry who pushes these ideas? It's Hollywood. Going to recent examples like The Acolyte, I have this other video pulled up that I wanted to remind people of. I've talked about before, but listen to Amanda Stanberg from The Acolyte when the show got canceled because nobody liked the quality of the show. Listen to her response as to what she believed was the reason the show got canceled.
That's when we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language towards us.
If that's how she feels, I'm not going to say that's invalid, that she felt like she had hateful language thrown at her. However, I was online the whole time. I saw what happened. I follow so many of the people who are getting the most heat about that Acolyte show, and none of them watching hours and hours of their content. People like Star Wars Theory. I don't think they're racist in the slightest. In fact, I would place all my money on the fact that these people are good friends with people of many different types of races, and there's never been a decision in any way that that's been racist in their business or in their content. And it's literally just a talking point to basically say that they didn't like the show, they didn't like the quality of the show, and we don't want to acknowledge that. So we're going to say because there was a lead actor that they're being racist, right? They're being hateful, they were being prejudiced, and what's crazy to me is how quickly Hollywood runs to this as an excuse for being lazy in writing, and it's divisive in nature. So yeah, I would say Amanda Stanberg, people we've seen, articles we've seen people write about the Rings of Power show when people are saying, hey, this is not a good show. It's not correct to Tolkien. Like, throw out all of the arguments about people try to make it about them casting characters that are Black. It's not what it's about. It's really just about respecting the lore of Tolkien, the timeline of events. It's not about, and the characters that are actually canonical. It's not about like the additional characters. It's not about the color of the skin of the characters. What it's really about is the fact that the show sucks and the real story that Tolkien wrote was better, and we're not seeing them make a story that's good. We're seeing them tell their own and call it Lord of the Rings. But yeah, Hollywood is pushing this dangerous ideology. They are, as Matt Walsh puts it, the racial hustler grifters, right? And they're the ones who are trying to cause the division. It's obvious. It's obvious every time there's criticism of a show in today's culture online. There's like 50 articles that pop up that say like there's been a slew of racist backlash against like this show due because there's a black actor in it somewhere. Like, it's truly incredibly transparent as to what they're doing. And it's only a matter of time before this ideology, I believe, gets completely rejected by the majority of culture. And Hollywood's going to either have to follow in the footsteps of culture and take back seat on this one for once, or they are just going to completely flop and die and lose tons of money and maybe never be able to recover, because culture right now doesn't want to listen to Hollywood, right? We know the truth. We know that they've been a propaganda machine forever, and we do want to be entertained by Hollywood. We do want the people that are creative to make good stories and good shows and good films for us to enjoy. However, we don't want to be preached to. And we definitely don't want you to push this incredibly crazy racial hustle ideology that's incredibly dangerous, not only to us and our community, or us and other races, but also just us as inside of our own families, like, or us and inside our own friend group. Like that, it's divisive and it's wrong and it's dangerous. And we've seen how it's dangerous, right, in this political season. So yeah, I think this is great that Matt Walsh has made this film. I think it's good that he made it funny, that there's tons of people that are enjoying it. Doesn't really matter their political leanings, and the people that really only don't like this film because it's objectively funny. The people that don't like this film are the ones who are so bought into this ideology that they're blinded by their own choice to be blindfolded. Essentially, that's the only way I can make sense of it. Is that they've chosen to be blinded to where, like, they don't recognize actual, like, humor anymore. And sometimes people are going to be the butt of the joke, not only for learning lessons but also for humor. And the people that he interviews in some of these crazies in this film are the butt of the joke for sure. And I'm not going to say it's nice, but I would also say that the stuff that the people he's interviewing aren't nice either. So I applaud it. I don't think we need to have films like this all the time and create this tension in culture. But when, the far left has been pushing so hard in one direction, we do have to have a natural balancing of the scales, for everyone to kind of land in the middle and to cool things off after. So I'm really hoping a film like Am I Racist is able to cool things off a little bit, especially for the majority of Americans, or the majority of people in culture, like Canadians, people from Europe, people all over the world, Australian. So we'll see. We'll see how all that goes. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the Matt Walsh film, the situation, everything that I've said. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Now, I got 2 more segments to get to, and I've already been going for 30 minutes. So I'm really excited to talk about this. Speaking of stuff that, I think is actually really well made and interesting to watch that's out of Hollywood, right? So I watched the Penguin show, the first episode. That's the only one that's out at the moment. And I wanted to answer this question because I know there's so much online right now. Should you watch the Penguin show? So I'm going to go through a little bit of my thoughts about the show, what might be a good reason for you to watch this show, and ultimately answer if you should watch it, right? Ultimately answer if you should watch it. And so if you're not familiar, The Penguin is a series on Max, and it is a follow-up following the Penguin character, following Colin Farrell's character. I'm so surprised this guy is Colin Farrell. Like, the fact that they made him so incredibly large with prosthetics and so ugly, because Colin Farrell's like a skinny, like, good-looking dude, right? But it's the follow-up to the Batman, the Matt Reeves film. And I know the internet's a little bit torn on this. I feel like people generally liked a lot of things about the Batman. And I'll say I really enjoyed it. I think it's far superior to anything Ben Affleck has done. I don't think it's necessarily better than Chris Nolan's The Dark Knight's films, but I definitely really enjoyed it. And so I was really looking forward to seeing what the show The Penguin does. Now I will say right off the bat, the Penguin show brings you back into this world. So if you watched the Batman and you enjoyed it, well, there's a really good reason to want to watch this show. Just from the first episode, I can say that with pretty strong confidence that if you watched the Batman and enjoyed it, you should watch the show, because it opens up with the theme song, like the one that from the Matt Reeves Batman is like I don't even remember how it goes, but it's very soft and it's like a downbeat. It's like dun dun, right? And it's just getting you right back into the vibe of it. And we went into a very specific location at the top of the episode that was familiar, that we saw a lot in the Batman. So it feels like we're in the same environment. We have the same music to opening up. And what was fascinating to me about the start of this episode, this show, this new series that's supposed to bridge the gap between this first Batman film and the second one, is the fact that the lighting and cinematography at the beginning of this show, at the first episode, was very reminiscent of the Batman. Now, if you've watched any of my content before, you will know that I am a really big fan of Greg Fraser. He is a director of photography. He's done things like Dune Part 1 and 2. He did The Batman. He did Mandalorian Season 1. And he's an incredibly skilled cinematographer, director of photography. He knows how to light stuff in a way that is just appropriate for the story that's being told. And I'm a really big fan of his work. And so he did The Batman, but he did not return to do this show. But I am pretty sure he is doing the second Batman film, which is going to be coming out, I guess in a few years, maybe. So getting back to the Penguin, the show opens up with the cinematography, the lighting, and the vibe of everything, even with the music, feeling like the show, to bring you back into the story. And then what I observed is that it slowly evolved in both the look and the music and the vibe of the story into what it wants to be as its own thing. It doesn't want to just mimic the style and the vibe of the Batman. It actually created its own, which is somewhere in between the Batman, but also kind of like this Sopranos kind of thing, right? It felt very reminiscent of the cinematography style, the nature of the composition, obviously the nature of the Penguin guy specifically. It feels kind of like Tony Soprano. And so it kind of lulls you in and then starts morphing into something new that I'm assuming we're going to live in for the remainder of the season, and then probably get back to that vibe in the second Batman as we saw in the first one, especially since Greg Fraser's going to return as a cinematographer for the second movie. Now, I will say what was interesting about the Batman was that they not only had super dynamic lighting, it was very specifically crafted to look a certain way, but they actually wanted to feel even more grungy. They wanted it to have this organic, rough feel in the images. And so I did a whole video on it, but I'll briefly say that what they did was they shot everything on digital cameras. They processed it, they color corrected everything, and then they turned and copied those digital images onto film, physical film negatives, processed that film in the chemical process that they used to do for like 35 millimeter. They still do for like IMAX film, like Christopher Nolan stuff. And then they rescanned it back into digital because there's an organic grain, slight coloration differences, everything made to the show, the film itself, the look of the images when you go through that organic process. I did a whole video on it. I'll probably, when I clip this out as a standalone video, so not live, I'll put it at the end screen so people can watch that. However, this film is a lot more clean. And like I said, it kind of has a Sopranos vibe to it. It starts off feeling like the Batman with all the aesthetic and the music and everything, and it morphs into something that I would say is more reminiscent of the Sopranos. It's not quite there, but it's similar, and that's kind of how it made me feel. I really like the beginning because there's always this problem with storytelling of exposition dumps, right? Exposition dumps are some of the most cringiest things you can see in a show or in movies, and this show handled it perfectly. If people didn't watch the Batman, it would help if you had, but if people were confused about where we were in the story, they know this is the Penguin character from the Batman. So where are we? Is this after the first movie? Is this before the first movie? Without the characters just saying like obvious things that it would be obvious to other characters, what they did was they opened with a series of news broadcasts relaying the damage from the end of the first movie and basically saying like a week has passed since the end of the Batman, where like the Falcone boss leader was killed, the city was flooded, everything's in chaos right now. And so they got a whole bunch of setup and exposition, but not in a cringy way, in a way that actually made a lot of sense. So I really appreciated that. I really appreciated the effort and creativity. And so basically, here's another reason why I think you should watch it. It's written intelligently. If you enjoy things that are written in a way that's like Sopranos, that's written with a lot of character depth, that doesn't feel like it's just regurgitating everything to you, and you like the process of sitting down and enjoying a well-crafted, well-characterized, and well-performed show, then I think you should watch this show. If you are a person that kind of likes to scroll on your phone and just sort of halfway pay attention, I wouldn't worry about it, because you're going to be lost. You're going to be lost. This is a show you have to pay attention to. So, if you're a person who likes to pay attention to your shows, definitely check this out. This is also just kind of a breath of fresh air in my mind, because I've seen so many garbage things. The past couple weeks, I've been looking at the Rings of Power and how frustrating everything is in that show. This is just a breath of fresh air as we're wrapping up in the next 2 weeks, the Rings of Power. Just trying to be like, something that feels like I can actually sit down and enjoy it for once, which is really nice. It gives me a lot of hope for the upcoming Dune series that Max is also doing. If you've seen any trailers for that and you watch the Dune movies, like I said, Greg Fraser was the director of photography on those. Max is coming out with a show that's a prequel show, not a prequel, but like before the Paul Atreides story about the Bene Gesserit witches. If you're familiar with that, Max is coming out with that. I'm really optimistic about that show, and I'm sure I'll be talking about it on the channel as well. Let's see. As I said, the general vibe is enjoyable. If you are not into dark shows, I'm not going to say you have to be a fan of Game of Thrones, but I will say there's some graphic stuff, right? It's a little bit more graphic, I would say, even in the first episode of this show. Actually, it's a lot more graphic in the first episode of this show than it was in the Batman movie. So the Batman movie was like PG-13. This feels like a rated R show. Or is it TV 17, something like that. So it's if you like darker shows, or if that doesn't bother you, you kind of find the ability to dive into them. It was made by, Max. They're the same people that currently stream Game of Thrones and currently stream The Sopranos, right? It's the same vibe as Sopranos. I'm gonna be honest with you. This feels like Tony Soprano. Sort of. It feels like a version of Tony Soprano was just shoved into Gotham and had to become a new character that wasn't just Tony Soprano. That's kind of what it feels like. So if you're a big fan of The Sopranos, if you're a big fan of Batman stories, and you're interested in diving into a iconic villain that we haven't seen any real incredible adaptations of as the Penguin, you should watch this show. If you are a big fan of the Batman comics, well, I don't think I'm going to have to convince you of this, but you probably won't like this show. You'll probably enjoy the writing because it's written well. You probably can enjoy aspects of it. But if you're a big fan of like the comic Batman stories, you probably also didn't like the movie, The Batman, right? So you probably fundamentally disagree with Matt Reeves' approach to the Batman. So I'm going to say you probably won't enjoy the show. You probably also should watch it so you can have valid arguments. And maybe you run a YouTube channel where you talk about comic books and DC and Marvel stories or something. But you should watch this show and talk about if it holds up, if it's any good. What I've heard is that people who are a fan of the comics of Batman aren't super into this Matt Reeves Batman film. And so I'm assuming they're also not going to like the Penguin. I'm not a big comic guy. I'm a movie guy. I'm a filmmaking guy. I like cinematography and editing, and I like all that stuff. So that's what I pay attention to. And quality of story, how it makes you feel over what it's trying to tell you. Those are the kind of things I care about. So a point I want to just bring up is the fact that good filmmaking, good storytelling, in my opinion, is not subjective. Now, taste is very diverse, but good and bad is not a subjective thing. What I believe is that there is actually good shows that can be identified, and you know it when you see it. In fact, you feel it when you see it, as opposed to something that is bad, right? And you feel it when you know that something's bad. So you could say, the Penguin's not my thing, but you can also acknowledge that it's objectively good because you felt like it was authentic, right? As opposed to The Acolyte, the Star Wars Acolyte show that just been ripped in half online the past few months, with good reason. When you watch that show, people who said they enjoyed it, I think, are not real Star Wars fans, first off, but also I don't think they're really paying attention and noticing how it makes them feel, right? Because if you feel apathetic towards it, if it makes you upset, if it makes you bored, if it makes you feel cringy, right? And not in like a way that's intentional. It's just like someone doesn't know how to deliver lines, or the writing is so incredibly dull that it just feels cringy coming out of these characters' mouths. You just know how it makes you feel. And I personally believe that taste is diverse and something can be your thing or not your thing. However, I think good and bad is not subjective. I think it is pretty obvious, and you gauge that on how it made you feel. And I think when it comes down to it, everyone will learn to agree on those facts. It may not be your thing, the Penguin. I think it is my thing. However, I can say with confidence, this is a good show. It is written very well. The characters are engaging, and it feels fun to me so far. And I'm only on episode 1. I'm not even sure how many episodes there'll be, but I am very engaged with this. And kudos to the cinematographers for, at the very beginning of the episode, making it feel aesthetically, lighting and everything, just like Greg Fraser's The Batman, to get us into the story, and then shift into your own color palette, your own lighting styles. But it started the show feeling like we're in the same world. And so it had that, it didn't feel like we skipped a beat. That was really brilliant. So that's what I have on the Penguin. Let me know if you guys watched the episode in the comments below. I'd really appreciate it. I want to hear what you have to say about this. Now, I got one more topic I'm really excited about, okay? I got one more topic. If you have heard of the League of Legends video game, you might have heard about the Arcane show, the Arcane animated show on Netflix. Now, you say, animated show, I don't like animated shows. Hold on. I don't like anime. I'm not a big fan of like Castlevania and all this stuff. I understand it is, I respect it. I'm not saying it's bad. I just got finished saying that, I don't think that good and bad shows is subjective. I think it's down to taste, but intuitively and can agree with almost everybody on what is good and bad. I'm not saying that. I can appreciate that anime and like shows like Castlevania are good. However, Arcane is something special. Now, I'm going to watch the trailer for it. I want to do a reaction. I haven't watched it. It's been out for a few weeks and I haven't watched it yet. The official trailer for Arcane Season 2. I really love Season 1, so I'm going to do a reaction to Arcane Season 2 after enjoying the first season so much, and I want to do it live here with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and watch this. Here we go.
You were right, Kate. My sister is gone. There's only Jinx now.
I want to tear that laugh from her throat forever.
Oh, tear that laugh from her
ready.
throat forever.
To return peace to this city, you must declare martial law.
Topside is the real enemy. You have the chance to rally the Undercity together.
Ooh, they're using
Your
Jinx
symbol.
as a rallying point.
So what are you planning?
Watch it all burn.
You felt it, haven't you?
The arcane is waking up.
Sometimes taking a leap forward means leaving a few things behind.
This has to end.
Then stop me.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Look, this makes me excited. This makes me really excited. Now, my first impressions, obviously. So they're going to make Jinx. If you haven't seen the show, Jinx and Vi are sisters. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but the season 1 ended in such a crazy way. It really did. And so Topside is kind of like where the rich people live, and then there are the slums. I can't remember. It's been over a year and a half since I watched the first season, but there's the underworld, or it's not underworld, but basically like the slums outside of the city gates, that's across the bridge and everything. That is where all the poor people live, and there's like drugs and all kinds of like different criminal activity, and so they're going to war against Topside, and they want to use Jinx as kind of like a symbol. And I think that's crazy, because if we know anything from the first season, Jinx cannot be controlled. She's way too traumatized. She's way too unpredictable. She doesn't really believe in anything. All she wants is to feel better, because she is so tortured by her incredibly traumatizing life. And so that's going to be a big mistake. And I think they alluded to it where they said, so what's your plan, right? And she said, watch everything burn in this trailer. I think it's pretty clear that it's like, look, you can make her your banner for what like, getting revenge or taking over topside, the true enemy, as they might say. But you're going to find out that she's not a good person to rally behind, because she's not the standard, right? She's not a warrior. She's not a revolutionary. She is a very dangerous person who is controlled by her trauma and her inner demons. And so that's a super interesting dynamic. I love the look that Vi has. I noticed a shot where she had darker hair, which I actually wonder. I wanted to just sample something, because I saw last week on Netflix it was Geek Week, and I saw they posted something on YouTube. So I downloaded it, but I didn't watch it. And I'm assuming this is something like a clip or something from Arcane Season 2. And I wonder if they go deeper into Vi at all. So I want to just sample it. I'm not going to watch the whole thing because I think it's a few minutes long, even though I kind of want to. No, I'll just sample it. Let me see what this is. Okay, so this is like a fighting match, it seems. Big fella. And this is another reason why I love the show so much. Like the cinematography, the chaos when it's meant to be chaotic, and the interesting choice of colors and character design, and the design not only for the movements of the characters, but also the movement of the camera, right? Our perspective of the events that take place in this world. And it makes the fighting scene so incredibly engaging. Oh, yeah, I was right. There she is. That's Vi. Or at least I think it is. It looks like her. And she's a fighter, so she would be doing that. Is that Vi? Yeah, that's Vi. Okay. So she's in the fights, it looks like. And I like her look. She also looks very scared. She looked a lot like more thick and healthy in the first season, a lot more stronger. She kind of looks scrawny, like a drug user or something here. Well, I can't watch the whole thing. I don't want to watch the whole thing. Also, I don't know if YouTube allows me to watch the whole thing. So, but it's super interesting. I'm going to finish it once I finish the live here tonight. But I'm very much looking forward to this show. I'm really excited about season 2. I hope the quality of storytelling is up to the same level as season 1 was. The characters are super interesting. Silco, my goodness. Silco from season 1 was such an incredibly well-told character. The voice talent for Silco, everything about this story is engaging. And if you haven't seen Arcane, I would recommend watch the first 10 minutes of the first episode. You will know if it's your thing. You can't argue that it's bad or good because it is objectively good. But if you watch the first 10 minutes of the first episode of the first season on Netflix, look up Arcane and just sample it and see, like, let me try this out, right? Because I bet this is what happened to me. My friend was like, hey, you got to watch it. And I was like, I'll watch the first episode. I watched the first episode, but within the first 10 minutes, I was leaning forward. And then I watched the first episode. I'm like, well, I gotta know what's going on. By 2 episodes deep, I was fully committed to this long first season. So check it out. And if you don't enjoy it, go to the comments and let me know, because I'm curious to hear people's arguments for why they don't like the story, because I was so engaged. Now, if you're a League of Legends fan, maybe you had your own ideas about what the show would look like, but objectively, this is a well-written, well-told, well-crafted show. So I would love to hear if you think differently, your points. However, give it a try. This trailer for season 2 seems exciting, and that little clip that I watched for that came out last week on the Netflix channel also seems to really interest me. I'm wondering why Vi looks so skinny, why she's changed her hair. I mean, after the end of season 1, I'm sure there's a level of depression or loss of hope that she's experiencing. I'm sure that's the case. I don't know. Let me know your theories down in the comments below. I'd love to interact with you and read them there. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining me on this live. I've gotten through everything. The Penguin. Should you watch it? I think so. Arcane season 2, real excited about it. Matt Walsh combating the woke ideology in Hollywood. Man, what a full show tonight has been. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you stick around for more. We're going to be live, myself, maybe just me, or maybe me and my brother are going to be live here again Thursday night in 2 days to review episode 7 of The Rings of Power. It's been a long 4 weeks so far of reviewing the show. And so we're going to be doing it again for episode 7 this Thursday. So stay tuned. Join us Thursday night for our live review, and we'll see you then. But I appreciate you who's watched this live with me all night, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening or day, whichever part of the world you're in. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.